At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES broadcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of the Super NES podcast. This is episode number 169. As always, this is Greg, joined by my guest host. We do have a guest host, but I'm trying to say co-host, Joe.
Hello.
I'm already tripping with my words. This is not a good sign. But...
I'm the guest that won't go away.
Yes, I guess technically it's true. Yes, but anyway, yes, guest host. As I mentioned last week, we're once again kicking off 5 episodes of guest hosts coming up, and for this episode, I'm very honored to have with us a fellow podcaster and also a personal friend of mine, Jala, to the podcast. So, hello, Jala.
Hello.
And in this episode, we were looking at one of Jala's favorite games. As I mentioned before last week, it is a game we've already covered previously in the past, Chrono Trigger. However, I figured it was okay to look back to look at the game again for a couple of reasons. One being which it was a long time ago we covered this game. Some of you, unless you've been with the podcast probably since the very beginning, and man, I cannot believe it that it was 2014. I started this already at this point, but it's been over 6 years since we covered this game. So a lot's changed since then. New versions of the game are out. New impressions are available. The people I'm talking with have not been on the podcast before talking about it. So I figured it was okay to make a special exception in this case to go back and revisit the game. So. And as I mentioned before, spoiler, we are planning upon revisiting Star Wars games at some point coming up also. So, once again, it's going to, there's something else that we're going to revisit, so you've been warned. But anyway, I've been wanting Jala to come on here and talk about this game for a few years now at this point, but Jala's a busy lady, so want to thank you at the get-go here, Jala, for taking time on your busy schedule to come on here and talk about the game with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I have not been on this particular podcast before, so that is fun.
No, we have all podcasted together before on the old PlayStation Power podcast where we covered Lunar. So
yes.
So because of that, Joe, do you mind taking just a few minutes to talk about a few minutes for the listeners who may not know you, a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to cover this game?
Sure. So I am a host on Duckfeed.tv's The Level podcast. It is a kind of roundtable discussion of what you've been playing, some multiplayer questions, things that are in current news for video games in general. That's what I usually do. I also sometimes will do bonus levels with one of my co-hosts going in depth on certain video games. The last one that we did was on Ace Attorney. So we do that kind of thing. I've also been on various other podcasts guest hosting about various subjects. I've been on different ones such as Monster Dear Monster, a monster exploration podcast, PlayStation Power from back in the day, talking about various video games and so on. Usually video games seem to be where I stay on the podcast field. But insofar as why I wanted to talk about this game was very obviously notable in its time frame for just various things that it brought to the genre of JRPGs and also just kind of video games in general. It brought some mechanical attributes and just storytelling conceits that really shaped and framed lots of video games thereafter. So it's a very formative game that in its time frame and ever since is still holds up. It's a great game, so that's why I wanted to pop in.
Yeah, that's very well that's specifically said. So why don't you talk about your Super NES experience and also your first announce, like, when you first played this game, your first memories of it, etc.
So I am super weird. Greg wanted me to get on this podcast for various different games, but I had only gotten, unfortunately, an SNES really late in its life cycle. I already had a PlayStation and a Sega Saturn, and I had been playing stuff like Final Fantasy VII before I even started playing any SNES games. And later on, like once I got the SNES, then I started retro gaming a bunch of stuff, but I don't have the childhood memories that a lot of people did because I got it so late in its life cycle and was basically retro gaming it. Chrono Trigger was my very first SNES game, and by the time that I played Chrono Trigger, like I said, I'd been playing things like the Lunar remakes on PlayStation, which are basically mostly animated films that you have some agency in. And then you've got things like Final Fantasy VII that I had played, and Final Fantasy VII had only come out a couple of years after Chrono Trigger, and it's kind of wacky to think about that now. But like the SNES just had such a long lifespan in Japan that, it's not weird when you look at the market, but it is kind of weird just in retrospect, thinking back. So I played Chrono Trigger, and I wasn't so sure what I would think about it because, again, I'd played, higher tech, newer JRPGs since that point that game came out. And I went and I played through, and I was actually very impressed and surprised by how invested I got in what was going on for this little sprite game, that was on an, at that point, antiquated system, because at that point, a lot of the thrust in the video game market was like, just let's get higher fidelity, let's get better graphics, let's get, new, improved, stronger systems. So like, even though there were a lot of great innovations happening on 16-bit still, everybody was like 32-bit's it. Like, if you're not playing 32-bit, you're not doing it right or whatever, like it was a weird way of looking at it, especially when you look at how people play games and enjoy games these days, where, you've got lots of intentional 16-bit or 8-bit style games on the market that people seek out. But anyway, yeah, like this game had so many different mechanical just innovations that weren't even implemented in some of the games I had played that were newer yet, that ended up becoming, regular parts of video games overall. They just became integral to just having a video game thereafter, that it was just like, it plays so smoothly, and the story, although it just deals in trope upon trope upon trope, it juggles the tropes in such a way that it gives you enough agency, and it doesn't spend too much time with any one particular trope, that it still feels fresh, like at every single point when you come across another time-honored thing that maybe has been done to death since, but at the time it wasn't, Like, say, for example, the floating city of mages, Zeal, that kind of a concept has been done so many times since, but I don't feel like it was as popular at that point, as it is now, where it's been done a lot. And basically, like, the whole idea of Lavos itself, and trying to take all the DNA from everybody in the planet in order to, create the perfect evolution. That's Cell from Dragon Ball. Like, that is just, he just put Cell in the game, and like, eventually that's where it would be in the Dragon Ball series. But like, it's very funny looking at all that stuff, and just how well implemented it is. Like, the pacing doesn't really slow down, because even when you get the ability where the world opens up, you have the epoch, and you can do all the side quests and stuff. It doesn't slow down the pacing, because that's your option, to go and do all the side quests or not, to mainline it. And so that is entirely up to you. The world opens up, but you can do what you want. So, and just with things such as having New Game Plus, the active battle system, the fact that you can dodge enemies on the playing field and don't just have to walk two squares and then suddenly there's another random battle, that you can have those battles happen on the field map rather than having to wait for a loading screen to go to a battle screen to do the battle and then have to go wait for another loading screen to get back to your field screen and then walk 2 more squares and have another random battle. Like, you know, like all of these things helped to speed up the gameplay. But then there were also additions of things like the cooperative text, where you've got multiple characters joining their spells and abilities together to do special attacks for extra damage and stuff like that. Just make it infinitely replayable. The New Game Plus, boy, that was like the first time I'd ever seen that before, was in this game. And, you know, it at the time, it was one of what was it, Greg? Like 3 games that had that? There weren't very many.
Well, if you officially, this game's recognized. So this game officially is recognized as being one of the first, if not the first, to have a New Game Plus mode. I mean, with video games, it's very, very difficult to say, okay, this is the very first game to done X. It's almost impossible to be able to say that. And you could make an argument there were games in the past that also allowed you to do like continue playing after the game actually finished kind of like mode. But as far as how we recognize New Game Plus now these days, Chrono Trigger was definitely the first game to have that. So.
Well, and then that's super notable too because of combining that with the ability to dodge enemies on the map and to have the, you know, like the battles on the field map and everything. All of those things that kind of speed up gameplay. Make this game, that with multiple endings to boot, you know, that made this game so replayable to where, like, yes, you would go back and replay it, but not because you want to go back through and experience the exact same thing over again. Like, every time you play the game again, it's a different kind of experience because you might have greater powers, but then your goals change each time that you're going through. Like, well, now I've got to figure out this one side quest I didn't figure out before, because when this game came out, people weren't really doing the, you know, walkthroughs and stuff. And people weren't commonly going to them as often as they do these days, where everybody's just pulling it up on their phone if they need to, you know. So, like, yes, there were, you know, game facts and things like that, but, like, it just wasn't. You wouldn't resort to doing that unless you absolutely got stumped at that point. The gameplay, you know, kind of experience was different, I think, back then. So, but yeah, like, my memories of it are mostly like having come off of playing, you know, Final Fantasy VII and Lunar's remakes on the PlayStation and different things like that. It was interesting to come to Chrono Trigger, which, you know, is for an older system, and then see a game that, you know, holds up to what was being done with these flashier graphics and stuff, because that was so opposite what was being forced down everybody's throats by the game companies at that time. Like, no, you've got to have the better graphics, you've got to have the, you know, the stronger system, and if it's not a stronger system, then it's not, you know, it's not as good a game. It can't be that kind of thing. So I found myself replaying this game quite a bit, and it's, you know, continued to be one of my favorite games of any genre, and that's really just because they had some really good people working on this game. Really good people who knew what they were doing, and, you know, combined elements of, you know, each of their experiences to make a game that was very streamlined in how it played and fun, very fun, and just entertaining. Like, I was talking to someone this morning about it and trying to explain the basic premise of Chrono Trigger. You can just say, there are some adventurers and they go trying to save the world by traveling through time. Yes, but, like, if you get into the nitty-gritty of it, there's a lot of moving parts in this game, and, like, you are managing 7 different time periods and worlds with different types of characters and scenarios, and, you know, sometimes you have to puzzle solve by going, well, how do I get this item that this guy won't give me because he's super selfish? Well, now I have to go back in time and talk to his ancestor and do this thing to have a butterfly effect to change how he thinks in the future by just helping out his ancestor or whatever. Like, there's all of this kind of, you know, generational stuff that you have to kind of think about and work with, and that was super out of the box and giving you like a path that was, on rails, right? You have to get to point A to point B. This is where you need to go next, but letting you decide when you want to go do that, or if you want to go back and revisit some other area instead, derp around somewhere, do some leveling. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't forcing you to go there, even though you know where the critical path is. And sometimes you could even access some of the areas that are, outside of your experience level still, kind of like the Dark Souls approach, where you can go anywhere you want to. You might die, but then that's when you go, okay, I'm not going to go there yet. I got to go somewhere else first. So yeah, that's what I got on that. How about you guys? What are your experiences with this game? Joe, you first. I want to hear.
Yeah, because Joe actually is the one who played this game new for the podcast for the two of us. So yeah, that'd be like fun to hear about.
So this is a game that I have attempted 2 other times. This is very much reminiscent of Lufia last recording. So I attempted this game numerous times. The 3 times that I attempted it, I got as far as the first portal opening up and going back in time, and that'd be it. Like, I would be on the search for the princess or the queen at that time, and I would get distracted, forget about it, whatever. The 3rd time, I actually did pretty well, had saved the princess and everything else, and I was ready to go back to my time, and I can't remember what it was. I think I was playing on my PSP Go, which is modded, and I was playing the emulator, and it died.
Oh.
And I had not saved anything, of course, because I'm notorious for not saving and just plugging away as much as I can. So I was kind of discouraged because I had played basically the same section over and over, but never got any further. So this time around, I was like, well, Greg said that the Steam version was fixed, and I had bought the Steam version a couple of years ago. So I said, I'll power it up, and to make sure that I can get through it, I'll download a cheap table and be able to kind of have God mode and, go through and enjoy the story and not have to really worry about combat. And I have to say, and the people are going to be bothered by this, but this is kind of meh for me. Like, it's not, I don't hate it, but outside of, like, it's charming, it's funny, it's even addictive, especially, figuring out where you got to go and, getting wrapped up in certain plot points and whatever else. But, like, and, like, the freedom to be able to make mistakes, and they knew that. Like, if you start the game, you're supposed to go to the festival, like, they kind of point you in that direction. But if you decide to not go to the festival and you go elsewhere, like, there's NPCs who are like, oh, let me show you how to do this, and they train you up on how to play the game. So, the creators obviously knew that, giving you that freedom, there was going to be that, divergence. Anyways, most people love this game, and it's a lot of nostalgia, I think, wrapped up in that. And maybe because it's their first experience with an RPG, I don't know, like, I love the aspects of the game as far as time travel. I like the idea of, multiple endings, so I have a reason to play it multiple times. The no random battles thing is fantastic. I mean, there's a few spots where, like, you're forced into combat, but it's not anything horrible. Mm-hmm. Biggest issue I had in my gameplay was the race in the future where you have to race, what's it, Johnny?
Johnny. Mm-hmm.
Johnny. So I raced him 5 times, and every single time it was like at the very end, like, I would use my nitro and try to cross that finish line, and somehow he would either bump me or he would get in front of me somehow. Either way, I finally figured it out. Like, you basically just do circles around him and keep boosting until you get to the end. And you got to block him a few times. But yeah, that was pretty frustrating. But outside of that, like, this RPG, and like I said, it's not a slight, you know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed what I played, but it's to me, it's somewhat generic, but not too generic. So you got your typical, Chrono is just a boy. He's not even a hero. He's a boy. He likes to be a night owl, clearly. You find that out in the beginning. His mom comes in, opens up the window, lets the light in. He wakes up. He's practically rolling over in bed. He's like, just get out of here. And then, he wanders off to the festival, and literally, like, it's all about fate. Like, Marla bumps into him, literally bumps into him at the festival, drops the pendant and all this other stuff, and then, you kind of pal around with her. And then you meet Luca, and then portal opens, and she gets sent back in the past, and then, like, Luca shows up while you're in the past, and you're trying to figure out, like, what all that's all about. She figured out how to open portals, and that's really where the story starts to expand. And you find out Marla is actually a princess. She's basically Jasmine trying to get out of the castle and visit the common folk. And I'm fine with all those tropes. Like, I am okay with everything that happens there. And for me, like, I thought one of the most interesting aspects that I dealt with was the trial. The trial surprised me big time. So I went in, and, like, I'm like, whatever, this is, like, going to be, like, some, predetermined cutscene or whatever, like, I'm not even, like, I'm paying attention to it, but I'm not. And then, like, all of a sudden they're like, did you pick up the pendant before you helped Marla? And I'm like, what? Wait, those things matter? Like, you know what I mean? Like, did I help this little girl and her cat? Like, what? Did you eat this guy's lunch? You know what I mean? And, like, thankfully I got a not guilty verdict, but, you still get hauled off to jail, so, I mean, that was, kind of going to happen anyways. But, by getting the not guilty verdict and going to jail, you actually gain a few things that you wouldn't have gotten if you had gotten the guilty one, because there's actually, guards and stuff who take sympathy on you and whatnot. But, then you get out of all that, you go back to your time, and then you deal with the royalty of that whole thing. Or, sorry, that's already in the present. Sorry, that whole thing. Then you go to the future. And then in the future, you find out that, basically the crux of the entire game, Lavos, in 1999, of all years, why they chose that, basically destroyed their world, and that's, the future that they're witnessing and trying to change. And that is essentially the rest of the game, is them going through different time periods, as Jala pointed out, to basically influence time, going back and forth to be able to gain your party, gain abilities, and be able to defeat Lavos and make the world a wonderful place. I don't know. I'm not saying I don't like it. I want that to be clear. I just don't think it's the holy masterpiece that everyone has claimed it to be for, like, the past 25 years. And I get it. I really do. But not having that nostalgia itch and having nothing to do with this game and just coming into it fresh, to me, it's no different than Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is a fantastic game, but there's a lot of nostalgia that people put on that game.
For sure.
And you know what I mean? And again, I like Final Fantasy VII. I like this game, but neither one I look at and go, oh, those are great RPGs. Like, there's nothing better. That's just not my personal opinion.
I would not say that Chrono Trigger is like because, okay, whenever you start doing this is the best, that is so subjective that, like, that doesn't work. You can't have a hands down across the board, this is unquestioningly the best one, because it might be for you and it might be a popular opinion, but that doesn't mean that is a correct opinion, if you will.
Right.
Because, like, that doesn't, like, say for example, what I mentioned was that this game is full of tropes. okay? And they have been done to death since. And, you know, even at the time, it was still trope. It was a trope for a reason. That means it's been done a lot. So, like, if those tropes don't hit for you, you know, or the combination or how they deal with them, and the fact that, like, you know, in the game they don't deal with grandfather paradox at all, you know, like that's not really a thing, you know. So, like, people who really like time travel stuff might hate this game just on the basis that, like, it doesn't really treat in, you know, all of those aspects. So you know, like, it's very possible that you go through this game and go, okay, well, yeah, it's fun to play, but it's not my jam, you know, definitely. You know, it's just that for me, when I was playing it, because, like, you know, it's hard to separate a game from its time period, and I didn't have, you know, super big amounts of nostalgia for it because it had already been out for a little bit before I'd even gotten to it, and I'd played other things since. But, every other JRPG from around that era was pretty much like the direct path. You go from this town to this town, and there is nowhere else you can go except to that town. You know, there's, you know, a very super critical path. There's not any jumping around. There's not management of as many moving parts as there are in this game. I'm a person who thrives on variety. I love variety in video games. Give me a lot of verbs. Give me a lot of capacity to explore. I love exploring. Let me wander around. I break so many games by wandering around and going places I'm not supposed to go yet, and, like, that breaks games left and right. I have exited levels so many times.
I have personally seen this.
Yes,
I can vouch.
I do. And, like, you know, like, I booted up. I was talking about this kind of recently, but, like, I booted up Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, and I was playing that, and in the first 5 minutes I had tried several different ways to, you know, do something different. Like, you know, here's Riddick getting off the spaceship and going with Johns to the prison. You're supposed to just go with Johns into the prison, but what do I do? I try to kill Johns, and then I break the game. I try to escape, and I get to a place where I can't get killed by the you know, guns and stuff, and I break the game. I kill the guy who's supposed to help me, and I break the game. I run back into the ship. Like, everything you could possibly do except for the critical path is what I'm doing. So, like, the ability to wander in Chrono Trigger was amazeballs. And, you know, the tropes, you know, again, like, the tropes are kind of hit or miss. There's definitely parts of the game that I like better than others because certain tropes or certain eras or whatever appeal more to me than others. And definitely for me, the nadir of the game when I played it the first time was that whole bike part with Johnny. I was so mad. And you can just walk across and just get past that whole part and not even really do that part. But, like, you know, like, that part, I could not, like, I played that so many times the first time I played it and was just frustrated and banged my head. And it was funny because I figured that it was going to be hard when I replayed the game, you know, for this show, and it wasn't. Like, I went through and I beat him on the first try and was like, I remembered that being, like, a sticking point for me, and I absolutely hated it, and that made me hate every other bike part in any, like, because Final Fantasy VII also had a bike part, and I hated that bike part. And, like, so, I mean, like, it kind of set me up for just hating all bike parts in any game that had a racing segment, because for some reason that was a short-term, you know, fanatic thing that everybody was sticking in there. But, yeah, but I definitely understand that, and it's not like, you know, like, even though it's one of my favorite games, it's just because of the certain aspects of it that appeal to my disposition as a gamer. You know, like, definitely there's room for all kinds of opinions on this, and I'm actually very glad that, you know, you say that, yeah, you enjoyed it, but it's not your cup of tea, because you know, if everybody was just like, oh yeah, this is the best game ever on this podcast, then you don't really have any room for discussion. It's just a lot of agreeing with each other, and that's not, you know, that's just patting each other on the back congratulatorily, and it's like, no, I'd rather have some.
And to be fair, there is an asterisk there. I was talking to Jala off air earlier, and basically confessed that, like, you know, not only did I cheat my way through this, but also, like, I got to Spicchio, and, like, I did, like, laps around, and I got, like, my first set of magic, and that was basically it. Then I went straight to Lavos.
Yeah.
I picked the wrong portal, and I went straight to Lavos. So, like, to be fair, like, I played, like, the bare minimum
Yeah.
of the game. And technically, from what I saw online, if I would have beaten Lavos, which, keep in mind, I dedicated 3 hours to fighting each different form of Lavos. I finally got to his final form, and I was like, oh, I have to record in 20 minutes, and had to just Control-Alt-Delete and close the game because I can't save. I'm stuck in the middle of the boss battle, and it was like the final form. Like, I was about to see the end. You know, they get married, spoiler. But, you know, it's like, I was so close and yet so far, and then, like, there's so much game after that, you know?
Oh, there is, because
So-
really, it's after you get past the end of time when you first get there that the game starts to open up and give you that breathability
Yeah.
and that kind of, like, really fun adventuring kind of thing where it's like, now the world's opened up, and right when you get to the end of time, there's some extra portals that open up, but it doesn't say you have to go directly to anywhere. Like,
Right.
usually in a
Right.
regular JRPG, somebody says, or like the dude Gaspar at the end of time would be like, you've got to go to this place, and he does say, well, you might want to go revisit the places you've been before.
Right.
But and you know, like, that's just like a hint, like there might be something different there, but like he doesn't tell you you've got to go back to 2300 AD or anything. Like, you
Right.
just pick where you want to go next, and then you're like, oh, well, now I can go somewhere. What do I want to go do?
So-
And yeah, there's a direct path. Like, obviously, the new time period you haven't been to yet is the next place that you need to
Right.
go on the critical path. But you're allowed to go wherever, and it's encouraged to explore because there are things that are different when you go back, and there are things that will kind of influence what happens next. Because as you noted with like the trial, there are a lot of parts where if you talk to certain people, or if you decide to do one thing or another, or tell them, respond to somebody in one way or another, that will change
Yeah.
stuff in the game. And that's really where it starts to open up and really breathe. Before then, it is super critical path, and you know, like, it's so much better when you have the ability to go from time period to time period, and having that hub at the end of time, and then later on having the time machine, the epoch, where you can just circumvent even having to go to that hub. That makes it so much better. So
Yeah. And then that's the thing. Like, my opinions, I want, like I said, with an asterisk. This is like first-hand account. This is my experience for like the first like 3 hours of the game. Well, and that's, you know what I mean, of a 30-hour epic game. So,
Yeah.
you know, this is like a hot take, a hot first take, more than anything else. So, you know,
Well,
I know some
I-
people will be upset with, you know, with my comments, but you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I'm sure down the line, in another 6 years, I will have finally finished the game, and Greg, Jala, and I can get together and we'll talk about it, you know,
Again,
complete
yes.
once again.
Right.
Well, it's always
Well,
fun to talk to somebody who has like the first like take on the podcast,
And-
the podcast like for a game. So, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember when I was first playing this game, I was not sold on it during that first segment. So, like, what you're telling me, Joe, like, guess who looked in the bucket also, but was a low level at that time and totally
Right.
died to Lavos. But anyway, yes, guess who did do that exact same path that you did.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did that on my first playthrough of this game. And I remember, especially, like, I really did not like the future at all. I didn't like the future. I didn't like the robots. I didn't like anything that was going on there.
Yeah.
And so I did not dig that at all. And so I was kind of meh about it. Like, there were things about it that I liked, and I was still curious. But, like, it was after the end of time thing opened up, and I could go to different eras. After you get past, like, there's another section where you have to go back into the past, and that time period is still feels kind of like a super critical path, but right after that, that's when it starts opening up. It opens up more and more as the game goes, and
Yeah.
it made it better as the game progresses, and it sucked me in kind of like middle to halfway, you know, like middle to like a little bit further than that, like especially after you get the time machine and can fly anywhere at any time,
Right,
and
right.
can fly around the map without having to be walking around the map screen.
Yeah.
and then also going from time period to time period as you felt inclined was great. And again, like, I'm somebody who loves traversal. Give me great traversal, and it's, you know, one of my most exciting things. Let me wander. I will be happy with that. So anyway, that's a very prolonged thing, though. Greg, we have not heard from you about your memories about this game. We know that you exist, Greg. It is your time to shine. Tell us all about what you had for your experiences with Chrono Trigger.
That's okay, because, like, you know, like, I knew that you were going to be chatty, so that's fine. But so I was actually exposed to this game shortly after it came out, and just to kind of drive home what Joe was saying earlier. This was a late Super NES release. It wasn't the last game for the system. There were some 1996 SNES games like Super Mario RPG and whatnot. So, but it was late. This came out in North America in August of '95. The PlayStation came out over here a few weeks after that. So, I mean, so this was like a late game. So, so I saw it in a friend's house. But for some reason I never bought it, which is strange to me, because I'm like, by that time I was already like a big JRPG fan, because, you know, I'd grown up playing Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy like the NES, and you know, and playing like Final Fantasy 4 and 6, and like Secret of Mana, another classic RPGs on the Super NES. But I just never got this game for some reason. I think the main reason for that was because by this point I was already in college, and, like, you know, as any college can tell you, money's tight. So.
Right.
And this was not a cheap game when it came out. So, but so I was like, okay, the game looks fine. It's like, you know, I saw enough of the game, but I didn't really, without hands-on experience, I didn't actually get the chance to actually find out why people loved it so much. So, around '98, I think Joe and I actually first played this game around the same time period. In late '98. I was in grad school at that point. Emulators were starting to become, like, very, very good at that point. So, there were a bunch of Super NES and Genesis games and whatnot. I was firing up and checking out. One of the first games I checked out was Chrono Trigger. So I sat down. I think it was actually through a weekend. I just played through an entire weekend and played the game from start to finish. So. It was still a few years removed from release, but it was still like a fresh enough experience because I was still using my Super NES at that point. The Super NES was still hooked up, so you know, I actually did not get a PlayStation until like right about the same time period. Actually, it was like maybe like you know, like early into '98, the winter '98. That actually finally got my PlayStation. Played a couple games for it, and like so, you know, I always liked the game, but. As usual seems to be the case when we guest host on here, my opinion of the game is kind of sits like in the middle, like both of you, because I'm like, I think this is a good game. I don't think it's a great game. I just that so you folks were saying nostalgia is a big part of it, yes. But it's also for me, it's like the problem with trying to compare this game is that, as Joe and I talked about last week with Lufia, another Super NES RPG. The bar set so high in the system for RPGs because there's like a dozen at least, probably more RPGs on the system that are all very, very good. Because this was because the system was the go-to place to go to if you enjoyed RPGs for sure. So it's like, and just like the bar set so high, it's like if this game come out on any other system where the competition wasn't as bad, it probably would be thought of even higher than it is today, which is to say something about the game. But it's like. I think this is a good game, and like you guys were saying, this game does do a lot of unique things. It's a very fun game, but I just enjoy Final Fantasy 4 and 6 better because I think that, you know, yes, nostalgia is probably part of it there for me, but I think those games, and it's also saying something all those games, like maybe the same company, Squaresoft, which is now Square Enix. So it's like a lot of this. In fact, a lot of the same people worked on like the same games. So it's like I said, the bar is set so high. It's like, you know, but because of the fact that but this game does do enough unique different things to it that really make it stand apart from, like, say, a Final Fantasy or any other kind of game, because of the multiple endings, the new game plus mode, not turn-based time system, the actual like able to see your enemies on the map. I think this is the first JRPG I played that actually gave you the option, which is all standard these days. There's no JRPG I'm aware of these days that actually does random battles like anymore. But because I've also been playing, at the same time I was playing this for the podcast. I've also been playing Dragon Quest 11, which was also fun to compare and contrast a modern JRPG with something like from this time period, the 90s, and just see how something's the same, and something's different. So it's like, in many ways, this game is very ahead of its time because of the no random battles, multiple endings, new game plus mode, etc., etc.
Right.
Because there were a lot of things. Dragon Quest 11 has all these things, like for example. So, multiple characters and whatnot. So it's very, very ahead of its time. It's like, and so the things that struck with this game, the things that struck with me about this game the most is that the beginning of the game, a lot of games will throw you right to a main quest, like, okay, you're a destined hero, you're the savior, blah blah blah, whatever. Dragon Quest 11 does that too, like to a degree as well.
Right.
But it's like, not this game. This game's just like, okay, you're a kid, there's a festival going on, have fun at the festival. They can make a friend. There's new exhibit being shown off. Whoops, the friend just got tossed back in time. So it's like it's like the way the game starts is actually like very cool in that regard. And also speaking about time travel, like I love time travel. Like any kind of franchise or story or whatever that has time travel in it is something I'm going to be like a sucker for, because it's one of the reasons I became a big Star Trek and Doctor Who and Terminator fan, is because of the time travel that the franchise uses. So. It doesn't bother me they're playing. It really doesn't bother me they're playing like fast and loose the time travel rules like in this game. It's like the time travel is fun. Like being able to hop back in time to do various time periods. And so much of this game, as you guys mentioned already, is optional. It's like I really appreciate because So that that's definitely a great thing like about that. And like the graphics are very, very good for a Super NES game. It's like especially like the Magical Kingdom. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it just like right now.
Zeal.
Zeal, yeah. The graphics in Zeal are beautiful. It's like really some of the best areas of the game, I thought. The music is also top notch, because next to I feel next to a shooter, and an RPG needs to have great music. Otherwise it's just gonna be like a flat experience.
Agreed.
So. And two very dedicated people and two very talented people work together to make the soundtrack for this game. And it's an amazing soundtrack. It's like, again, I think Final Fantasy music is a bit better, but the soundtrack of this game is really, really, very good. There's a lot of like very memorable pieces that stuck out my head like this game. So,
yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to point out was like the music and the graphics of this game is, to me, is what stands out more than anything else. I mean, yes, it's unique, but this is like late SNES at its prime. Like they were pushing it as hard as they could, and they said, "This is how good we can get these graphics on this system before we bow out and go to 32 bits." And then the score is amazing. I need to get the soundtrack. Bottom line.
I have the soundtrack, and I listen to it when I do working out or whatever. Like I love the soundtrack, and not only that, but like the sheer amount of emoting that happens with the little sprites is just great, because they're like, well, we're up against other systems that have better graphics. You've got your Dorito men in the Final Fantasy VII that you can go see the Dorito men doing their thing and their little cutscenes, with their stilted graphics. But like that was so cutting edge at the time. So they did all of their emotes direct on the screen instead of doing cutscenes. They did like, let's just use the sprites, and that is something that it was not done. I mean, it was sort of done, but not to the degree that they're using it in this game. I can't remember very many sprite games that did that kind of a thing. Now these days, sprite artists do all kinds of stuff, and do that regularly now, but this was pretty formative to just like showing the capacity for getting across emotions and stuff with sprites. Like when they later on added the full animated cutscenes and stuff for the DS version, I didn't like those. I actually preferred it when it was in the sprite art in engine. It looked to me it looked more in line with what was going on with the rest of the game, and there like in Lunar, okay, this is a good compare contrast. Lunar has the animated cutscenes, but there's like hours of cutscenes versus like 3 minutes
Right.
of cutscenes in Chrono Trigger, and that makes a big difference because if you're seeing it all the time, then it seems cohesive to the rest of the game. If you're seeing it every few hours, you see like a few minutes or like a few seconds, not even minutes, a few seconds of animation, then you're like, that's weird, because then they also left in the sprite animation. So you watch it animated and then you watch the sprites doing the same thing, and it's like, that's weird and stilted, you know. Like it wasn't too exciting for me. So I was not a fan of the cutscenes.
Yeah, I
they
actually,
added.
right. I actually feel a bit different to think about that. I agree with you that so I agree with you. The presentation for the cutscenes is not the best, but I really enjoyed the cutscenes being added later versions of the game, because I'll talk about this a bit later on. I've experienced some of the other versions of the game too, but it's like for me, yes, they could be done better, but I'm always the kind of person like more is better. Just give me extra stuff to add on to things. I'm usually all over because to get another square comparison, like they did that at Final Fantasy Tactics. The original game didn't have animated cutscenes, but when they came out with War of the Lions several years later, they added in some cutscenes that really enhanced the game. I thought it really helped to embellish several plot points of the game. I kind of think Chrono Trigger did the same too of that. But I mean, I don't blame anybody for saying it kind of destroys the purest look of the game. But I really enjoy the extra content.
Well, I think that's the thing is that there's so much of it that's just subjective. It's not like I'm gonna sit here and say your opinion of this is invalid. It's 1,000% valid. I could see people enjoying those cutscenes just because it gives you a different perspective. It gives you more detail than what the sprites do and so on. But just for me, I think, I just like the kind of, it feels more cohesive without them. And, because that's how the game was originally designed, was without those little cutscenes. I'd rather see those cutscenes as like bonus material at the end of the thing, or on New Game Plus maybe, but not like on the first playthrough. I don't know. It just felt kind of weird. Like, give me that as an optional extra, not like you definitely have it in there, and then you have the sprite version going, because then it's just like, well, now I kind of just want an animated version of Chrono Trigger that's updated, because people have been wanting that. People have been wanting that for years and years. So
yes. Yeah,
and
yeah.
as much
we
as
will talk about that like a bit later on too, about like Square's zealous efforts to protect the franchise. So,
know, but like, the thing is that as much as I really, really enjoy this game, something that I feel about it is that I don't want a remake. I like the game as it is. I feel like a remake would not be able to do justice to what they had done in the original, because Chrono Trigger started to define a path for video games to take thereafter, and that path has been taken since, and run with, and now they are just assumed parts of the genre, or of video games in general, or of sprite making, and to try and do Chrono Trigger over now, you can't divorce this game from its time period that it came from. It would still be a fun game, but it wouldn't be a great game if it were remade now, because it wouldn't have the innovations that it had at the time period. It wouldn't have any of that impact. It would just be reliving the greatest hits, and that falls flat for me in particular.
And that,
I
honestly,
would not want that.
That reminds me of why Chrono Cross wasn't that great as a quote-unquote sequel.
Oh, I have thoughts about that, but but yeah, Joe, I definitely agree with you. The enhanced version of the game, that one can buy now is very good, because like we'll get into that in a little bit, I think. But but I enjoy all the added stuff the game has. A full remake of this game, all the Final Fantasy 7 or Resident Evil 2 and 3 is not really needed, and it really wouldn't. It really wouldn't add anything like to the game experience. So, but yeah, replaying the game now, I picked up a couple of things that I really didn't pick up the first time playing this game through all those years ago for some reason like or another. But it's like you guys mentioned Final Fantasy VII earlier. Just another comparison. And I never thought about this until playing this again. And I played this game after I already finished Final Fantasy VII. So, but it's like I was struck by how similar this game is. How similar this game is in some ways to Final Fantasy VII. Especially like Lavos versus Jehovah. In both games, you have like an alien parasite coming down to planet and like causing a great disaster and just sitting there for thousands of years, just sucking up sucking up a life energy and eventually going to destroy the planet. But it's like and I'm like, how did I not like make that connection? But yeah, to be blatantly obvious about that. But yeah, and also the fact that I think this is the only JRPG, as a matter of fact, that still to this day, speaking about like groundbreaking things, the main character in this game, Chrono, he actually dies.
Yeah.
Not only does he die, you can not only does he die, you can beat the game without getting him back if you want to.
Yeah.
It's like that's just like mind blowing. It's like it's like I cannot think of a game even to this day that does that, because like a main character it's like a main character like it's like it doesn't matter if it's a book or a movie or whatever, you don't kill the main character. I mean, like traumatize the main character, sure. Beat him up a lot, absolutely. But actually kill him. But so
well, that's funny that you say that, because there is an old manga series, Yu Yu Hakusho, where the main character dies. That's the very first panel. He's dead, and he's a ghost, and then stuff happens from there. But like
interesting, okay.
And that was made specifically because the artist/author wanted to start off his thing with the character dying. And so actually my own comic Sailor Moore begins with the main character dying as well, for much the same reason. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I was almost done. I was also going to say I was also struck playing this game also with the fact that just how much, and I guess this really isn't shocking considering the games came out like a year or two apart, but this game plays a lot like Final Fantasy VI as far as the graphics and the graphics and the text style, the presentation and whatnot. I mean, like it feels like the same engine for the engine that Final Fantasy VI uses, just kind of like souped up a little bit. So, and especially that's very true. That's very true in the original Super NES version. The enhanced version that's available now, that's changed a bit as far as the presentation goes. But I'm like, I'm looking again, going like, I never realized before just how much it has in common with Final Fantasy VI. But again, it's like Squaresoft in this time period, the early mid '90s, they could do no wrong. They were hitting everything like at all cylinders at this point. Yeah. Everything the company did was gold. It didn't really matter. Yeah. It didn't really matter what system it was for, what the game was. It was a great game. So it's like the people who work on this team. There's a reason Square calls this Dream Team. There's no way that a caliber of this cast is ever going to get together again for anything. I don't think, because for various reasons. But it's just like, so you just have a unique combination of people at the right time, the right place, the right company backing it up. It's really so. They really put a lot of effort and money into this game, and it shows. It's like, and the game sold very well. Also, I couldn't find any modern sales figures, but my best estimate is like altogether this game between the Super NES original and the enhanced versions is probably sold worldwide around 45 million copies. But so yeah, I mean, there's a reason this game's done extremely well. I mean, is the game overhyped a little bit? We can argue
sure.
that.
But at the same time, basically, because this Dream Team worked on the Final Fantasy series, Dragon Quest, and all these other things like that, it's 100% valid for anybody to be like, well, I liked what they did in, Final Fantasy VI better. I like what they did later on in Final Fantasy VII or whatever. There's definitely a lot of cross DNA. They are dealing with the same concepts and ideas because it's the same creators doing different things in combination with different partners, right? Yeah. So, they're getting influences from each other and from just whatever they're thinking about at the time. And so, like, all of that cross-pollination develops different types of iterations on themes that were common for their works. But, like, yeah, definitely. Like, I wouldn't, poo-poo anybody who says that they like Final Fantasy VI better than they like Chrono Trigger. I'd be like, well, cool. Like, and what?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely, it's really, really fun to think about what all was coming out extant, like, at the same time as, or a little bit before, or a little bit after, and then how the decisions that were made with each combination of new team and new project, like how those decisions played out, were iterated,
Yeah, exactly. Yes. One last thing, also, I noticed this time around, there are a lot of games like which the bad enemy, or which there is an enemy in the game, a game which get the name like Mother Brain, but which like Metroid obviously, but it's like there's also like Phantasy Star 2, and like the Wild Arms series, the Wild Arms series, another RPG series like as a character called Mother, just like. It's like, wow, like Mother Brain's being used a heck of a lot, isn't it? But
Yep.
I just never cut up I just never made that connection like in the past. But yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't think that the Mother Brain in this one is not my favorite iteration of a Mother Brain concept, but
no, because it's secondary,
yeah, it's definitely secondary. I do like one thing that I do think is that in this game they definitely have favorite characters. Like the creators had favorite characters, and those characters got more pathos and more like development than other characters did. And because Chrono is a silent protagonist, he's just kind of stuck and doesn't have anything, because this is still the era of all the silent protagonists for a lot of the games. Like,
Yeah, he does get 2 lines in one of the endings, so...
Yeah. Oh, God, he said 2 lines, guys. 2 lines. Yes, there's all of his character, right? Basically, like he's just, he's a cipher for the player.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, so...
But anyway, yeah, so... But yeah, like Robo, for example, and Luca, they are the 2 characters that I think the creators just absolutely adored. And Luca is like the whole, like, this game wouldn't happen if it weren't for Luca.
Exactly.
Because that's just a fact. And Chrono Cross, I did not play Chrono Cross, but it is my understanding that Luca also is like a formative and important part of what happens in that game, like, for one or another reason. So, like Luca is like their favorite character, to the point that she is the only character that has a last name in this game. Nobody else has a last name, but she is Luca Ashtier.
Oh yeah, you're right.
She is the only person who has a last name. Nobody else has a last name. So
I actually never noticed that. A good catch.
Yep. So, and like Robo definitely was one of my favorite characters, just because of like the decisions that they do and the time that they invest in this character. Like they spend a lot of time with this character.
I was going to say,
yeah,
with the time that I had with the game, Robo was the most fleshed out character that I got to deal with. And I actually really liked his little story arc where, like, we bring him back to life and he's working with us, but then, like, he was originally evil, and his other robots that, he's happy to see them, they're his friends, but then they basically are like, oh, you turned on us, and basically beat the crap out of him.
Yeah, and like he has a lot more story later on. Like you have the option for one of the optional quests is to basically restore a forest for a particular lady, and that kind of like changes the map, this entire area of the map for one of the regions of the game. And Robo can stay behind and spend 400 years restoring the forest, and then he's broken down when you find him again. And then Luca fixes him again, and then he's like, it's fine because, we were able to heal everything. Right. And then he also has another time, like the part with Mother Brain where his robot girlfriend, Atropos, which is a pink robot, the only pink robot with a purple ribbon. But anyway, that's a good side quest to do, regardless of what you think about Robo, because Atropos gives Robo her ribbon, which speeds him up, and he needs that desperately because he is very slow. But anyway, like, she's been brainwashed by Mother Brain and then ends up having to be fought against and dies. and like you have to stop Mother Brain because Mother Brain is trying to kill the remaining humans, and that's what that whole narrative is about. So like one of the endings, the happy endings, is where Robo and his girlfriend Atropos are both alive in the future and are fine, and happy, sitting on a cliff watching the epoch fly by. So
Yeah, my actual favorite character in the game is actually probably like Frog, because
I
he's,
love
like,
Frog too. Mhm.
I mean, the story is good. His character is something I could actually like relate to a lot, because it's like, here's somebody who had a great tragedy. He's physically been changed as well too. It's a constant reminder, like, of the past. But at first he's like, nah, I don't want anything to do with this. But eventually he finds the strength to be able to confront. He finds strength to be able to confront his past and to be able to try to change things, make things like the better. So, and in most of the endings, he actually is a frog. There's only a few endings I think where actually like he gets like turned back to human. So, it's like it's like a permanent reminder, like the pain and suffering that he faced in the past. So, yeah, which I personally like really like relate to. So, Joe, what's your favorite character?
Well, a lot of Frog's whole MO is that he just doesn't have the confidence, and as a human, like, because basically Frog's story is such that he used to be a human. He grew up with Cyrus, who was the Knight of the Realm and like the famed hero, and he ended up basically being Cyrus's squire and was like helping Cyrus with stuff. Cyrus kept on telling him, "You need to be a knight," and Glenn was like, "Oh well, I don't think I have the courage to do what needs to be done," or whatever. And so since from the very, very beginning, he's been struggling with self-confidence issues. And even as a frog, he gets transformed into a frog when his friend Cyrus dies. And so, like, he just remains super self-conscious, but then ends up, finding the strength and, like avenging his friend and saving, the queen and all of that. But, his whole arc is interesting because, yeah, you're right. Like, there's a lot, you expect with all the other things that have happy endings here that, like that Frog is gonna get his form back, but that doesn't happen. Actually, probably my favorite character is not even one of the main characters. So if you want to specify main character versus not main character, my favorite character is Jala. Jala, who gets the shortest end of the stick in the whole.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Jala is the daughter of Queen Zeal, who was, the person who first decided to take Lavos and try to manipulate Lavos in order to gain eternal life, and ends up being the one to bring, destruction to everything. And Jala is trying to, she's torn between her love of her mother and her younger brother, who ends up being Magus, and then wanting to help, stop her, and is trying, but ends up, like variously dying, getting absorbed by Lavos, all different kinds of bad things happen, but she never, ever, ever gets a good ending. It's always a bad ending, no matter what. And Magus's whole point is he wants to avenge, his family and whatever on Lavos and kill Lavos, but also he wants to go find his sister, and that's like his whole shtick. But I actually, most people attach to Magus. I don't attach to Magus. I attach more to Jala. I actually, feel for her because that's pretty rough. But insofar as like main cast characters, I would say either Frog or Robo. It just kind of goes back and forth for one of the male characters, because even though Robo is a robot, Robo has male pronouns and whatever and whatever. So, but also for the female characters, I actually like Isla, the super cave woman lady who beats everything up. She doesn't get magic because she's like from way before magic was a thing, but she's super notable because this was at a time period when it was hard for me to find any strong female archetypes anywhere that don't cop out at some point and need to be saved by a man. Like there's like Xena, that's about it. Like so like there's and then like also Sarah Connor and things like that. But like, you know, it's few and far between most of the time. And you know, they have to be bailed out, or they fundamentally change or something and turn into, you know, weird girly tropes. But Isla is just, you know, strong, and, you know, she is the leader of her village. She has, you know, like, her love interest, who's, you know, like, self-professed to be like, no, she's strong, I'm weak compared to her, I can't even, you know, like, she's the dominant person. She, you know, like, even in the endings, like, there's, you know, she basically just like forces him to to get married to her, and it's great because, like, that's just like her personality or disposition. And as a go-getting female who is physically strong, I'm a personal trainer among various things that I do. Like, I can relate a lot to that. And at the time, I was nowhere near, like, the personal trainer that I am today or anything like that. But, like, a lot of the disposition, like, with the strength, the leadership qualities, fearlessness, like, she is one of the cheeriest characters, but also fearless, you know, will just jump out there and be like, nope, we gotta go do this thing. And I'm 100% down with that. So I respect that quite a bit as well.
So yeah,
Awesome.
like I said, with my experience, like, Robo's kind of the character, you know, I attach to. But having seen some of the endings and knowing how things are going to progress, I'm really interested when it comes time to follow Luca's story, because it seems like it really involves her family to the point where, like, you can, like, prevent her mother's accident, which changes a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm really excited to, you know, dig deeper in the game and get to, you know the other characters. So this way, Robo is not really the main character that I'm attached to.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, Luca, I think, like, Luca was definitely the creator's favorite character, I think. But it feels to me like, in a lot of ways, even the characters in the game kind of just take her for granted, and it's weird because, like, I really like, the thing is, it's kind of hard because I really like Luca, I like Robo, I like Frog, I like Isla, you know. Madge is, I don't know, I think he might have been my favorite when I was younger, but, like, you know, I've grown up since then, and like my dispositions have changed, you know. But, like, about the only thing I can say is that Marl has never been my favorite character.
Yeah.
I don't hate any of the characters, but she just doesn't... She's just, like, you know, the upstart princess who's the main love interest of our hero, who is a silent protagonist. That's not real interesting to me. Like, everybody else seems to have a more interesting and more engaging narrative and have, like, a kind of internal growth that happens, and she does too, but, like, it just doesn't feel as in-depth as some of the other characters. So
Yeah. So Joe, you mentioned earlier, like, about the difficulty of this game. I think the difficulty of this game is pretty good as long as you don't, like, try to really take things too much like out of the suggested sequence, and as long as you actually, like, you know, like, fight a lot, you know, to keep your levels up. The pacing of this game, as far as difficulty and whatnot, I think it's, like, pretty balanced. I forgot, though, playing this game again this time. Man, there are a lot of boss fights.
Yeah.
there are a lot of boss fights, but boy, like, I remember when I first played this game, how often how long it took to fight Magus the first time.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
like,
Yep.
later on when you go through New Game Plus a million times, because, like, I played the original game, I played through once regular, and then, of course, just lots and lots of New Game Plus. I don't think I did a vanilla run through of that game ever after that first time. So I until going back and playing it again, I'm like, wow, yeah, I remember this was, like, a really long boss fight. It just takes so much time, you know. And I don't know if that's just because, like, it's not that I avoid battles, but I also don't go and grind. I don't like grinding. So I don't know if that's the thing, or if it's because of how many items I have, or, you know, if it's just it always takes that long. I know you didn't get to that fight, Joe, although you did when you were fighting against Lavos. But Greg, how was the Magus fight for you when you were playing through?
The first time back in '98, I remember that being a very difficult fight. I definitely abused save states a little bit in trying to do that fight. This time around, not that bad. I was, like, better prepared. I knew what to do. time around. So it is still basically a challenging fight. I think that's that. I think the fight where people who basically, because the temptation just to run past enemies to advance the plot is tempting, because I'm having the same problem with Dragon Quest 11, because it's like at least at random battles, if you fight the random battles, you're usually appropriately leveled up for whatever the game posits you. In games like this or Dragon Quest 11 or whatever, where you get to avoid battles, I'm more the mindset of like, okay, I'll just skip past this area because I want to get on the plot, and then I'm like, oh crap, I need to go spend an hour or two grinding up to get my levels up.
See,
so,
and I'm the opposite. Like, I know going into an RPG, like, it's gonna get grindy at some point. So, like, I am, like, especially at the beginning, like, the first 2 hours of playing an RPG, I'm like, oh, you move, let me attack you. Like, so, same thing, like, I'm playing through, you know, Dragon Quest 11 as well. It's like, anything that moves, I'm just like, yes, I'm swinging my sword at you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of, I don't skip fights. I do all the fights that are in the path, you know, like, if there's a little guy on the screen, I will fight him. You know, in Chrono Trigger, but like I don't go back through areas over and over again and do you know, farming for items or things like that. And like, I probably, if I did that at least a little bit, it would make that, you know, a little bit smoother. But the good thing about Chrono Trigger, at least for me, is that it is an RPG that is designed specifically so that you do not really have to do any grinding. So like, it's possible to go through the game, and as long as you're not skipping battles along the way, you can get through the game, you know.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about some of the ports a little bit here. I think I'm the only one here who has experienced like the PlayStation version of the game.
Negative. That was my first experience.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So. So that game was included with Final Fantasy IV as part of like a compilation of like
Final Fantasy Chronicles.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and you know, like Chrono Trigger on that system is fine. They had some enhancements which are also present in later versions of the game as well also, but the emulator that they used for the game, I don't know. I'm not really sure if it was the emulator or just simply like the people working on it really didn't care, but that version of the game, it has low times. It has bad low times. But I mean, not at the point of the game being unplayable, because it is like perfectly playable. But it's like every time you go into a menu or you want to like do a fight or whatever, there's a couple seconds of like low time on the game. Yep. So you know, over time it adds up to probably an extra like hour or two to spend like waiting for things to happen. So a little bit shoddy with the porting there on the PlayStation, but so I never really played the version very much because of that, because I'm like, what do they do to this?
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was one of the first experiences where I had where like, you know, I had it and I played like maybe 30 minutes of it. It's one of those like went to the festival, bumped in the Marla, you know, got to like the Luca point, and then like once you're in the past, I went through like started to go through the forest, something came up, shut the game off, and then just never went back to it.
Yeah, so I'm very glad Square decided later on to make a to make a totally new version of the game for the DS. Yeah. So which I had that version of the game back then. I wish I had it now still, because that's a very expensive version of the game.
Yes.
But I mean, like, the Super NES version of the game holds the value pretty well, but the DS version is like very expensive these days. But luckily for us, they later ported that DS version of the game also to phones and also to Steam, because Jala, I know you play. So I know you played the Mo version. Joe and I played the Steam version. They're both, both the versions are still currently on sale. Right now, Mobile's like $10. Steam's like $15. So, they really added a lot of stuff on this the version of the game. The version of the game. It had the cutscenes. They also added in like a default run option, which is nice. Without clicking map screen, options between the control schemes, just basically a lot of like what I call modern enhancements. What somebody playing a game these days now in 2021 expects, like, for a game. So a lot of it just like updating the game from 95 mentality to like a more user friendly experience, which I experience this day. which I really appreciate. And there's also like some, there's also a monster battling arena you can do for some fun, 2 new areas, new ending of the game. But they also did a brand new translation of the game, and Joe, I don't remember the translation of this game being that bad. It was actually like a very good translation of the game, I thought. But so I was surprised they did that.
They changed. They took a lot of liberties.
Yeah,
Like, say for example, the way that Frog speaks in the original translation, he has basically a pseudo Shakespearean English thing, but nobody else in his time period speaks like that. And when he was younger, he didn't speak like that. It was only when he was as Frog that he had that, which makes no sense. So in the original Japanese, he actually speaks really, exceptionally roughly and is impolite, and like rougher speech. So in the remake that they did, he has antiquated but still a little bit more modernized English, and he doesn't have the kind of accent that he does as he, from the first translation of it. And also a lot of the translation changes were things like, for example, having to do with Nintendo's guidelines. Like, say, for example, in the past when they were going at the party and having the drinking contest, it was a drinking contest, but in the original translation, they changed it to soup. They're drinking soup, not alcohol. We don't do alcohol on Nintendo, that kind of thing. So, like, they changed a bunch of stuff like that just because of the Nintendo of America guidelines and things like that. So, I prefer the new translation. It's better. It's definitely better. It's more in line with what they were originally doing.
So how does the game play on mobile for you, John? Because I can imagine a game like this is like isn't it like a bit hard to control? But so I'm kind of curious.
No, it's just fine. I have had no problems playing it on mobile at all.
Cool. Okay.
Just because, like, I don't know, like a lot of the on the field map battles, I just turned on auto battle. I didn't have to worry about tapping because it's. You don't need to worry about that for most of them unless there's ones that you have to use a certain type of attack or something, magic or something. So yeah, like, I didn't have to worry about that, and it plays just fine. Easy to screenshot, easy to make comments on Twitter, because that's my fanatic thing to do. So at a certain point I stopped because it was just like, that takes too much time away. I need to finish playing this game, so whatever. But
Yeah, the Steam port of this game, when it came out, was very buggy because it had several issues with it, as Joe already previously mentioned. But actually, Square Enix, to their credit, they released a bunch of patches for it, and now
5 patches.
So now the Steam version of the game plays very well. I rather like it a lot. The only real complaint I have about the Steam version of the game, and Joe, I'm curious to know if you feel the same way about the mobile version of the game, because it was originally designed for the DS. The dialogue boxes and the text was reshaped to fit the DS screens better. So on a bigger screen like a mobile computer, I found the text to be kind of the text of the game kind of be on the small side, like a bit hard to read. So
no, the text was not hard to read on mine at all. Although I will say that the sheer volume of responses to my tweets with screenshots of the game where people were just like, this is an atrocity that they updated because they made the text look like streamlined and clean and like a modern type of thing, rather than looking in-engine 16-bit era looking text, and that bothers so many people. I'm like, I can see it, I understand, like it's I see it. I don't care about it. I'm not invested in it.
Speaking about Final Fantasy again, that's what fans.
Yeah.
The fans are
going
through these
the
days,
same
like
thing.
Like new version of the game. So, but
yes, that's the same thing that they're fussing about with that too. And like, I understand. I'm not saying that that's an invalid thing, but I don't personally care, so it's fine. But no, like on mobile, it's fine. I have no problem with the text size.
So there were 2, I guess, pseudo sequels. I'm not really sure. So I'm not really sure if I would call them true sequels of this game. There were so it came out, Radical Dreamers and Chrono Cross. Radical Dreamers I played in emulation several years ago. It's like a side story of the game, basically. It's like you just It just takes some of the characters, some locations of Chrono Trigger, like Chrono Trigger, just like advance with them. It never got released in the West. There were plans to release it with a PlayStation version of the game, but that never actually happened, unfortunately. But there has the, but there's a fan translated version of the game floating out there that somebody can check out if you want to. It's fairly short. Like, if you're a big fan of the game, I highly recommend checking it out because it's fun. Chrono Cross is interesting because it's like it takes a lot of the same ideas and some of the same concepts of Chrono Trigger, but kind of, like the gameplay and the time travel and whatnot, but kind of goes a totally different direction. Joe, I know you said earlier that you really didn't care for it that much. Do you have any experience at all with the game, Jala?
Nope, I never played Chrono Cross.
Yeah, I beat the game when it first came out. It's fine. I think it's a good game. I don't, I think better the game than Joe does because the opening of the game is very, very strong. It's super strong because it's like you start off. It's like again you have like your silent protagonist who lives who has a quiet life in the village, and just like one day all of a sudden he wakes up and he finds himself just suddenly like it seems to be the same location, but he goes in the back of town. It's like nobody knows who he is. It's like all of a sudden he doesn't exist anymore, and then you find out later on that like you're dead. Like you actually go to your grave site, and that's a very powerful way to open up a game. But the plot of the game after that point kind of falls flat for me a little bit in some areas. It's just not as good as Chrono Trigger is. I think anybody who enjoys Chrono Trigger will enjoy Chrono Cross, but it doesn't have the same charm, I guess, that the original game does. Flair might be the best way to describe it. So, but anyway, so, and there have been several fan attempts to make a new Chrono Trigger game over the years, but which Square has been very zealously protecting with like cease and desist orders. But one of them actually is still out there. It's still out there for download. You can find that you find and play if you want
Echoes.
to. But yeah, but it's like it's strange. We probably can camp on this topic for a couple minutes because it's like I understand a company wanting to protect its trademark because after all, this game is still available for sale and whatnot. So, but at the same time, Square Enix repeatedly said over the years they're not going to make a new Chrono game. But because anytime talking about doing it, they've always ended up rolling over those ideas or concepts like different game that they made. So they're obviously not going to make a new game. It's like why? I just wish they weren't so super zealous as far as trying to stamp down people's efforts for franchise that they're clearly not interested in anymore, except for trying to print money out of it at this point.
Yeah, milk the IP for all of its
exactly.
nostalgia.
So, but so they're not. So they're not as bad as Nintendo is because Nintendo's super zealous with all their stuff. But at the same time, to give you another example of a company doing this, two examples of a company doing this right. There's a franchise. There's another franchise I love called Wing Commander, which is a space sim game. Basically, which is well known for having a very deep plot as well as very fun gameplay. That there's not been a new Wing Commander game out for over 10 years at this point, and the rights of franchise are not currently held by Electronic Arts. And you think of all companies because his reputation being very evil. So you think about companies that they'd be very jealous to protect the copyright. But actually, some fans released a new Wing Commander game a couple years ago with a new engine and whatnot. And EA is just it's like, nah, we know about the game. We're not going to make a new game in the franchise. You'll have at it. But so they as they actually don't care. Then just give another example. Somebody at Microsoft made a Halo-inspired game for the Atari 2600, and Microsoft's you're making Microsoft's you're making a Halo game for a system that's been off the market for 30 years now. We don't care.
Right.
Have at it. But so it's funny to see how companies handle this different ways over the years. But so yeah, it's I really wish. Obviously, there's still, as Jala mentioned, there's still a very passionate fan base out there like this game. So absolutely. I think Square could do things to milk that in a more productive way they wanted to, which unfortunately they don't care about, because they do some things right. I mean, like, they were under no obligation to fix the Steam version of the game, so that was cool. But at the same time, you look at this and you're like doing like facepalm.
Yeah.
But
I feel like Final Fantasy VII is their sole focus at this moment. They're trying to pump out the rest of that
Yeah.
remake. And
Yeah.
what we get after that, I think, is where it'll be interesting to see where they change their focus, whether they start creating a new IP or if they're going to try to revisit some of their older stuff.
yeah. Well, they have already announced Dragon Quest 12, so we know that's coming. And I've also, I've also heard teasers of Final Fantasy 16. So, obviously those are Square Enix's bread and butter franchises.
Right,
So of course,
right.
they're gonna, like, keep milking those. But yeah. Beyond that, it would be fun to see like what they go to next, like, for sure. So, but anyway, So Jala, do you have any thoughts either way about the mobile version of the game? Like, good, bad? Like, do you think it's superior to the original version of the game?
I say it is a serviceable version of the game. Playing it on the original system is usually the best way to go. Although, I'm betting that it probably felt best, like the remake version, because this is the remake version on the mobile, probably felt best on the actual DS, but I wasn't about to go hunt down the cart and try to buy that cart at this juncture, so I was like, nope, mobile, that we will do mobile, that's fine. So no, it's serviceable. I don't think that there's anything particularly bad about it. Having the little control pad pop up on the screen doesn't bother me. It doesn't get in the way of anything important. So, because your fight sequences and stuff don't involve using the D-pad. You just tap on the menu with your finger wherever you need to be tapping. So it goes away when it needs to go away, if you will.
Right.
So yeah, it works just fine.
Okay, cool. But anyway, yeah. So, it was very fun going back to Chrono Trigger again after all these years, because I think the game still holds up very well, but just like I said before, I think that I think this game personally is a bit overhyped. I think it's a very, very good game. I don't think it's I don't think it's the best JRPG made. I don't think it's the best JRPG made for the system personally, but that said, I do think the game holds up pretty well, and holds well. And it's hard, Joe. Like I said before, it's hard. It's very hard to divorce. It's very hard to divorce the nostalgia from the game. But it's amazing. But still, it's there's so much of this game. There's so much of this game that was either new or the game improved upon when it came out in '95. It's still being done today in 2021. So it's this game is really groundbreaking in many ways.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this game, more than being, hands down the best, whatever JRPG or whatever category you want to put it in, I would rather reshape that and say that it is a very influential and innovative game. It was the iterations that they were doing in this game. If they were not the first iterations, they were a fine-tuning of a lot of systems stuff. So, I think that is a better way to frame that.
I agree.
Personally.
But so Joe, I know you said that you were a little bit underwhelmed with this game, but I totally understand the arguments for it. But curiously, you did say that you are interested in going back to finishing the game at some point, huh?
Yeah, I plan on continuing my adventure for sure. I actually, before I went to go fight Lavos this morning, I made sure that I made a separate save so that I have my original save where I'm at the end of time, and then I have the second save where I'm in the middle of the first fight with Lavos. So,
yeah.
I do plan on going back. Whether I will be able to complete that this year, we'll see. But, I think when we finally do our yearly roundup at the end of the year, I'm hoping that I can at least say that I'm at least a little further in the game.
Just getting to one ending,
that's
my book is fine, because you can watch it there and just on YouTube these days.
Yeah,
anyway,
very
so
true.
it's
And I told Jala before we started recording, I did, watch some of the full motion video endings, so it's like I know that Chrono gets married to Mila and all that other stuff, so it's like and it's nothing that's spoiler because like duh, that's gonna happen, you know what I mean?
Yes.
For sure. And for me, the reason I decided to get the mobile version was because the propensity for me to open up Steam and then promptly get lost in my library and never go back to playing whatever I was last playing is very high. But on my phone, I'll be like, oh, I've got Chrono Trigger. I'm sitting in a line. I'll play a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easy to just pull it up, and it bookmarks.
The bookmark
so
feature's great.
if you were in the middle of... Yeah, you can get back to it right away. So if you close out of it and haven't gotten to a save point, it's fine.
Yeah.
So that's great. And like having it on my mobile, I have it whenever, so I can just kind of play it in between things as well, and then not feel bad about I haven't gotten to a save point. It's saved. It's fine.
So Jala, how do you think the game holds up for you today, playing it now compared to your earlier experiences with? And do you have a favorite ending?
So I was really expecting to go back to this and be like, oh, this isn't as good as I remembered this being or whatever, but it actually ends up holding up pretty well. Like a lot of my experiences this time around are mirrored by the ones that I had previously. So that's like what 20 some odd years ago, 20 plus years ago that I was playing it before, and I come back to this game and it still feels pretty much like it did the first time, even though I know what's happening, what's going to happen next, and things like that. It's kind of more, it translates from not knowing to having anticipation for the parts that I like coming up and things like that. Overall, I think the best way for me to frame it now is that because games have come so far in the last 20 whatever years since this game came out, it's fun to revisit it because I played it so long ago. But if you are playing it fresh now, you've seen so much of what this game is doing elsewhere that unless you are specifically looking at it in terms of the time frame that it was released and just appreciating it for like that element of the kind of dynamic setting that it came from, then you're not going to necessarily enjoy this any greater than you are any other RPG that you're going to be playing, that's extant or whatever. There's some indie games that I think are shorter and have simpler mechanics but are way more impactful than this one, for example. So it's not like this one is the ultimate example of whatever, but it does still hold up as a super fun game, and especially if you are looking at the time frame that it comes from, it was very notable at its time. So I definitely understand both camps, where people either are like, it's okay, or whatever, or it's a really, really fun game, or even if someone says it is my favorite game, I understand why you're saying that, and great, more power to you. Whatever it is, enjoy it. You are free to enjoy or not enjoy as you are inclined. I do think, though, that it is definitely hyped up. It's hyped up more than I think it's warranted, but it's mostly because of that impact that it had on games after that. It was very innovative in a lot of ways, and really kind of started a kind of new mode of game making. So, I mean, like, in a lot of ways, it even kind of was one of the games that kind of brought a feeling of an open world video game, even though it wasn't open world, because it allowed for more
You definitely get that illusion
exploration.
because of the time travel aspect, yes.
Yes, so like it has a little bit of that feel too, even though they couldn't actually make it an open world game. So, very fun, very cool.
Yeah, awesome. Just a last question. Do you have a favorite ending?
Not really. I don't, because even the super happy ending where okay, Robo is together and then everybody's together with everybody and whatever. Like, even those endings, I don't know, they feel like obligatory. It's like, oh, they have to have a happy ending that does this. I don't know. I especially since this game is so timey-wimey, and then Chrono Cross, it plays with parallel dimensions, and so does Radical Dreamers, right?
Yes,
Isn't that
yeah.
supposed to be like a parallel universe or something? Like, they all kind of exist in my head as being true headcanon. These are all just different parallel versions, and I can't really say that I prefer one.
Yeah, I agree mostly with that. I would give a slight nod to the ending in which Chrono's mother and cat accidentally goes into the time
Yeah, that's fun.
to
That's
time
fun.
for it because that cat actually helps you with the boss fight earlier in the game. So it's
Yeah,
like,
it does.
but-
It does. Mhm. Yeah.
And
And then it's so funny too, because your mom jumps into the portal and then I'm like, oh no, and then Chrono's just like, yes, because he's like, adventure. Okay, that's your mom, dude.
I think it's one of the reasons I like that ending so much. Yeah, because it's kind of open-ended, but
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, definitely. Joe, do you have any? So, Joe, do you have any final thoughts about the game? Anything else you want to say?
No, like I said, I'm going to end up going back to it. This is more a first look than a strong final opinion. And I hope that, like I said, in 6 years we could revisit.
It's a deal.
Yeah, I probably will by that point. But yeah, so we didn't plan the timing of this, but as timing this like the final side note, because it turns out another video game podcast that Jala and I listen to called Watch Over Fireballs is actually going to be covering this game also later on this month, and they're going to be doing an in-depth walkthrough of the game and talking about the game in much greater content than even we covered it. So if you're a fan of the game, definitely you definitely keep an eye out for that podcast. The podcast that drops out. Fighter drops later on this month, so this is going to be a lot of Chrono Trigger coverage for you, the fans out there. So hope that makes you all happy. But anyway, so yeah, that was fun. Jala, it was great to have you on the podcast. It was awesome to finally have you on here to talk about this game that you talk about this game that you love so much, and really thank you again, as I said before, for taking time on your busy schedule to come on here. So. I don't know if you have any. I don't know if you have affection for any other Super NES game to the point we want to come on the podcast in the future. But if you ever want to, the invite's always open for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll talk about it.
So you mentioned earlier some of the podcasting, some of the podcasts that you did before. Where can people find your podcast or podcast at, or anything else that you're working on currently that you want to plug?
Sure. So you can find my podcast at thelevelpodcast.com. You can also go to duckfeed.tv and see the entire network of shows. Insofar as other stuff that I'm working on, I pop on to Monster Deer Monster podcast every once in a while. That one is monsterdeer.monster is where you can find that on the internet. And otherwise, just continue to enjoy the SNES podcast with Joe and Greg.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Joe, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30, and obviously I have a very public Facebook.
Yes. Yep. Speaking of Facebook, that's one way you can contact us, because if you have a group on there, you can also send me an email directly if you want to at the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. I recently had a problem with the account where it got locked up and I lost a lot of messages. So if you send any comments or feedback or whatever recently, please send it again. I do apologize. I apologize about the tech issue, but so I have some feedback that's already come through, but because this episode's already running a bit long, we'll save that the feedback for next time. So speak about next time. We're going to be having another guest host, as I mentioned before, Will, from the Televisionaries podcast, who's also been here in the past. Talking about one of his favorite games and a game I've not played for a very, very long time, Super Adventure Island. So I was a big fan of the NES ones. Did not spend a lot of time on the Super NES one. Joe, do you have any experience with that game at all?
My experience is much like yours. I played all three for the regular Nintendo. I actually played the ones on the Game Boy, and I even played the ones on the Master System. But
that's right, there was one over there. I forgot.
But yeah, and I have played Super Adventure Island at least once, and at least for more than a half hour. So I do remember some of it, but it's definitely going to be fun to go back and replay this game.
Oh yeah, especially after covering like meaty yeah, especially if covering like media RPGs.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say playing 2 RPGs back to back. I am looking forward to like the platformer.
We didn't plan that way. Just like we didn't plan that way. Just like Jala told us when she was available. And like, okay, we'll change things around. Shuffle. Okay, but anyway, awesome. So, yeah, thank you again, Jala. Once again, thank you. Thank you very much for being on the podcast with us.
Thank you. I forgot to give my Twitter handle. You can find me on the internet in places. I am Jala-chan.
Yeah, she's very chatty, and I like on there. So definitely go check that out if you want thoughts on a lot of topics. So, but alright. Thank you again, everybody, who listens to this podcast. We always appreciate your support. Stay safe out there. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Later, all.
Bye-bye. Hello, this is Jala again from the Level Podcast, and I wanted to add a little bit more commentary about the discussion of Chrono Trigger versus other video games and how the focus of Chrono Trigger on the events that transpire versus the focus of something, say, for example, like Lunar, which I mentioned during the episode, where Lunar is more character-driven and character interaction-driven, where that presentation really will alter the degree to which any particular story will stick with you. For example, I like both of these games quite a bit. They're both on my favorite video games of all time list. However, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time and I'm talking to them about video games that I feel were impactful to me, in my life that really stick with me, I will pull up Lunar immediately and start showing them some of the cutscenes and things from that game and talking about things that happen during the narrative and the choices that the characters make, particularly in the case of Alex and Luna, the main characters of the first game, and of Hiro and Lucia, the main characters from the second game. But when it comes to Chrono Trigger, even though the story is fun and even though the characters do have some development and do experience some degree of growth throughout the game, I don't end up bringing that one up like, oh yeah, that one is definitely one that really, impacted me greatly. It's very, very fun to play. It is something that I probably revisited far more than I played Lunar over again, just because the gameplay is such that it is designed for you to continually revisit the game. But narratively speaking, I have more affection for Lunar, even though Lunar is by no means innovative when it comes to the genre of JRPGs. About the only thing that it happened to do that is now a standard thing is it put a lot of emphasis on cutscenes and, the cinematography of what they were trying to convey. And Chrono Trigger has that with the original sprite art to the degree that they had capacity to put it in there. And they did later on add those little bits of cutscenes into the DS version, but they were limited in how many they could add because of the size of the cartridges they could make for the DS. So, that is just kind of a product of what system that game came out on. But at the same time, that kind of a thing, along with various other elements, like Final Fantasy games have a different way of approaching the narrative than the way that Chrono Trigger does. And just depending upon what elements of a game really stand out to you as being the most important, that will really kind of dictate where Chrono Trigger falls for you personally in the kind of hierarchy of JRPGs that came out at the time or since or ever. So that was just an additional comment that I really wished that I would have remembered to say during the episode, because that would have been great for discussion. So anyway, if you have any commentary about that subject, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Jala-chan.
Hi everybody, Chris from the Stone Age Gamer podcast here, and oh boy, Chrono Trigger. So I was supposed to be on this episode actually with you guys, and oh, I'm super bummed my schedule didn't work out because I love talking about Chrono Trigger. It's one of my absolute all-time favorite games, and it's pretty interesting, actually, because I was never into turn-based RPGs before this game. I always thought that they were kind of ridiculous. I just couldn't wrap my head around them. I was, silly enough, I was always bothered by the fact that whenever you get into a fight, it goes to like this whole separate screen, like you're warped to another world to have the fight. And obviously I got over that as I got older, but man, when this game came out and you just did the fighting right there, it was kind of amazing. I also was just getting into Dragon Ball at the time, so Akira Toriyama's artwork was really at the forefront of my mind, and there was just something gorgeous about this game. Everything about it was so amazingly... The graphics were incredible, the music was unfathomably good, and me being a diehard console warrior at the time, this was a real feather in the cap for us Super Nintendo fans over to lord over the kids at the Sega Genesis lunch table. But yeah, man, this was the first game where turn-based stuff really clicked for me. I started with Dragon Warrior on NES. I played a tiny bit of Final Fantasy. I tried Final Fantasy 2 and 3 when they came out on Super NES, but this was the one that actually made me understand that those kinds of games can be good. And then I, bridged into going back and doing stuff like Final Fantasy 3/6 or whatever you want to call it. But Chrono Trigger's been the one that's stuck with me the longest. I try to replay it as often as I can, and it's been way too long since I've actually replayed this game. And so much so that when the sequel came out, when Chrono Cross came out, I was working at Funcoland at the time, and I took a week's vacation just to play Chrono Cross, which was ultimately not worth it. I know some people love Chrono Cross, and I understand the reasons why, but it was not anything at all what I wanted out of a Chrono Trigger sequel. Yeah, the Super NES version's still my favorite. People love the DS one, but the DS one includes this like extra ending thing where you get to, Magus tracks down Jala, and well, I don't like that ending very much because, there's no happy ending, and I want that to be a happy ending, doggone it. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. Chrono Trigger, it's incredible. I could just ramble on and on about all of my time with the game and my favorite things about it and all the multiple endings and the music. Oh, I could just keep talking about the music forever and ever and ever. And in fact, I did. We did a couple episodes on the music of Chrono Trigger on my game music podcast Waveback a while back. So I'll look those up. Those are a good time if you want to hear. If you really want to hear me ramble about Chrono Trigger more than this, then go ahead and do that. Otherwise, again, I'm sorry I missed the episode, but thanks for including my audio submission, and I will talk to you guys later.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.